Hello and welcome everyone. In this video I'm going to talk about the methods and tools you can use to create designs in a large scale format. So for things like murals or very large signage or large banners or things like that. Because if you do any sketching beforehand, usually your sketch is much smaller. So we're going to talk about how you can either transfer your design onto a larger surface or otherwise recreate it on the surface itself from what you originally sketched. And of course, you can always do it freehand if you wish, but depending on the design, I generally prefer planning it out ahead of time and sketching it out beforehand. So, if you are like me and want to learn how to transfer your design onto a larger surface, then I will help you with some tips in this video. But first, a quick intro for those who are new to the channel. Hello, I'm Shannon, owner of Shrush Design. I specialize in hand-lettered and illustrated designs for things like signage, murals, invitations and other stationery, digital graphics, and more. Here on YouTube, I make tutorials of how to do these projects, my methods, the tools I use, and the software I use on a regular basis. For anyone who may be interested, I now also have a free companion course to go along with these videos here on YouTube, where you can get access to additional notes, any digital downloads you may need, extra practice, and the direction of where to go once you master the tutorial. You can find that link down in the description, or just go to my website, www.shrushdesign.com, and look for the online courses section. Okay, let's get on with the tutorial. Okay, so I'm going to go over some of those large-scale design methods first. The design methods are going to vary based on the type of surface that you're creating the design on. Basically, the main thing you need to know is whether your surface is transparent or translucent. It's basically the same in this regard. Or if it's opaque, where you can't see through it at all. So for transparent or translucent surfaces, there are a few examples. If we're talking about complete transparency, as in completely clear, there are two main types here. There's glass, so that can be windows or even most picture frames are glass. And then there's also clear acrylic or plexiglass or plastic. Now both of those can also be more translucent if they're tinted a certain color. And then two more translucent types are light colored paper or light colored fabric or canvas. Generally with both of these you have to kind of strain to see through them, but usually if there's a light source behind it, you can kind of see through it. And we're going to talk more about that when I get to the methods. But there are much more variety of surfaces that are opaque, such as a mirror, wood, chalkboard, metal, wall, basically whatever your wall is made of, drywall, plaster, etc. Stone, concrete, asphalt, things like that. Dark colored paper that you can't see through even with light. Dark colored fabric that you can't see through even with light. So the methods you can use with these surfaces vary. Some you're only able to use if you can see through, and some you're only able to use if you can't see through. So let's talk about those. So first I'm going to go over the methods that you can use with both of these types of surfaces. Those include drawing freehand completely on the surface. Then you can also set up and use guidelines to guide your freehand drawing in a way. You can also do a chalk transfer or a charcoal transfer depending on what you want to use. I'm going to demonstrate this method later in the video, but basically you have your design drawn out on paper, and then you flip the paper over and basically saturate the back of the paper with either chalk or charcoal, and then place that paper chalk or charcoal side down on your surface, and then go over the design with a marker or pen, and that will transfer that chalk or charcoal onto your surface, so you have a design laid out on your surface in a temporary way, and then you can make your final design from that. Similarly, you can do a pouncing method, which you take your design laid out on paper and use a pouncing wheel to make holes, perforations in your design, and then fill those holes with chalk dust, or you can also go over it with a chalk marker or something like that to fill in those holes. And again, you would have a temporary version of your design on the surface. You can also do a grid transfer, so what you would do there is take your design, make a grid of squares over your design, and then make a grid of squares on your surface that are larger, but that you can scale up from your other squares on your paper, and then recreate your design square by square. Then there are methods that you can use only with a transparent or translucent surface that you can see through. So the first option is you can use a very large piece of paper and sketch out your design there. Then you can put it behind whatever transparent or translucent surface you're using, and you should be able to see through it and be able to trace your design through your surface and onto the other side of your surface. Another thing you can do if you have a very large piece of graph paper or grid paper, whatever you want to call it, you can put that behind on the back of your surface and then use those grid lines as guidelines for you to draw your design. Now with the light colored paper and light colored fabric, you do have the option of shining light through those and your paper with the design on it so that you can trace those designs onto your surface. And you can get a light box or a light pad at any art supply store or online. But if you need a bigger version, you can make one with a light source very easily. And there are two methods that you can only use with opaque surfaces. One of them is what's called a doodle grid. I've never done this myself. This is mainly used for wall murals, especially ones that you're spray painting. And also for those who use a digital version of sketching, like Procreate or something like that. But basically you would spray a bunch of shapes on a wall and then take a picture of that wall and then impose your design digitally on the picture that you just took with all the doodles on it, and then use those doodles as a guide to making your design on the wall. The other option for only opaque surfaces is to use a projector. So again, you would make your design and then be able to project it onto the surface with a projector and then just trace it onto your surface. The next category I'm going to talk about are the tools you can use to make these layouts onto your surfaces. Now you don't have to run out and get all of these things right away. It depends on what you plan on doing. And even then, these aren't 100% necessary to get the job done, but sometimes they're a nice convenience. And the first category I'm going to go over is tools for temporary marking. So number one, just a piece of plain old white chalk. And if you didn't already know, you can actually sharpen your chalk if you have a sharpener that has a big enough hole to put the chalk in. But chalk pretty much works on all surfaces and wipes off easily. It gets a little hard to see on things like glass that's completely clear, but most of the time you can still see it. Another similar option is the Stabilo All pencils. They come in all different colors. I have all white ones, but it's basically a colored pencil that, again, you can use on most surfaces and wipe very easily off. And it's a little sturdier than the chalk and makes much thinner lines. Speaking of thinner lines, there's another option for chalk. So there is this mechanical chalk pencil by Boheen. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a very thin little piece of chalk that you can put in a pencil like you would a mechanical pencil. And it comes with little refills of the chalk, just like you would, again, with a mechanical pencil. You can make very, very thin lines with this chalk. And since it's made of chalk, it's very easy to erase for most surfaces. Depending on the surface, you can also use pencils, so basically any type of pencil, just a regular number 2 pencil, charcoal, wax. Obviously test out your surface first to see if you're going to be able to erase it, but on most surfaces this will work. And another option you have is a chalk marker, because these are also pretty easy to erase off most surfaces. Again, check beforehand, but they also give way more visibility than any of these other options on your surface and are a good way to temporarily put up guidelines or draw your design before you use your final medium, whatever you're using. So the next category is tools that are used for measuring. So your first option is measuring tape, and it's probably the best option when you're trying to measure a surface so you know how big it is before you even start the job. Other than that, I have a big variety of different kinds of rulers myself. All different sizes, all different materials. Sometimes I need a smaller one to get into a smaller space, and sometimes I need a bigger one. Speaking of bigger ones, I'm talking about bigger rulers as well, like yardsticks, or even like this baby, a double yardstick. Goes all the way up to 6 feet or 2 yards. I was so happy when I found this. The next category is tools used for making straight lines. So obviously rulers and big rulers, that's what we all think of when making straight lines. It can also help to get yourself a level. Even better if you can get one that has a ruler on the side of it like I do. Then you can use that one for measuring as well. But there's also another type of level you can use, a laser level. Now I'm talking about this small one that I have that you can use, especially when you're making like a larger sign, because it's easy to lay it down on a table or the floor or something like that and have your laser level there as well to be able to project that straight line out onto your surface. But if you were to do a wall mural or something like that, something else you could use if you had access to it. I don't actually have one of these, maybe someday, but like a larger laser level that has its own stand and everything, you can stand it in the middle of the room and have it project onto the wall, which people use to hang things in their home. Again, this would be a very good option for a wall mural. Another thing that can help with making straight lines are a variety of squares. So there's T-squares, framing squares, set squares, pivot squares, all kinds of squares. And we'll talk more about those in another category. And the last thing I have in this category is tape. This is usually used in conjunction with another tool to find a straight line, but once you have that straight line, you can mark it with tape rather than penciling it in or chalking it in. And actually, speaking of chalk, I didn't put this on the list, but I probably should have. You can also use one of those snapping chalk lines that you can get, if you know what I'm talking about. But you'd have to have someone else hold the other end for you, and then someone snap it in the middle, and then you can have a nice chalk line that's straight. So that would be another option. And then there's tools for making angles. So again, we're going to talk more about those squares. So the first option is a T-square. This one will make either straight lines or 90-degree angles very easily. The T-squares generally come with a way that you can hook the one part of the T-square onto something like a window frame, which is supposedly square and parallel to the floor, or 90 degrees to the floor, depending on which one you're using. And then from that, using the other side of the T-square, you can draw a line that is perpendicular to whatever surface you are resting on with the T-square. You can also butt it up to like a joint, like whether that's the ceiling and the wall, or again, the top of the window where it meets the frame. So you can easily make a 90-degree angle, vertically or horizontally from depending on where you have the T-square set up. I'd say if you're going to get any square, this is the one to get. It's the most useful. Now there's also a framing square. This one comes in like an L shape, kind of similar to the T-square in that regard. You can make an easy 90-degree angle from this, or a straight line. And then there's all different types of set squares. So you have ones that make 45-degree angles, 60-degree angles, 30-degree angles. And you can also make right angles or 90-degree angles with this square, just setting it up a different way. And then I recently got this square. It's a pivot square, so I can lock this into any angle that I want in case I want a very specific angle that's not 30, 45, 60, or 90, or a multiple of that. I haven't used this yet, and I'm probably not going to for a while, but I thought it might be useful at some point, so I bought one. Now another thing you can use is a standard old protractor that you used back in geometry class. And again, you can find any angle you need and just make a mark, and then use your straight edges to make your angle that you need. There are also some tools that you can use to make an arc or a circle. One of those being obviously a compass. Now, for most projects, a small little compass that you use in, again, geometry class is probably not going to help you in a large scale drawing, depending on how big you need your arc or your circle to be. But they do sell larger compasses that teachers use when they're teaching geometry to their students. This one actually is made for a dry erase board. It's got a little suction cup on the end of it, so you can just suction it onto the board or a window. And then you can put either a piece of chalk or a marker, like a dry erase marker that they would use it for, or a wet erase marker or a chalk marker or even a paint marker in the end of it, and then make your circle a much bigger circle. Now, if you don't have one of those, an option is you can make your own sort of makeshift compass using either a piece of string or tape. So you would tape whatever writing tool you're using or tie a string around it at one end, and then the other end, as far as you want to make your circle, the radius of your circle, you would hold that end at that point in the center with one arm, and then use your other arm to hold your writing tool that is connected by the string or the tape, and keep that string or tape completely tight all the way around so that it doesn't move around, and then you can make your circle that way or your arc. It's obviously a little harder to do, that's why I bought this compass. But another option you have is you can make a template or a stencil beforehand with paper or cardboard, and then just trace that. And then finally I have some other tools, sort of miscellaneous category. A few of them I've mentioned before in this video, but I want to show different things you can do with them. So the first one is tape, or tape plus Sharpie. It doesn't have to be a Sharpie necessarily, that's just what I use. But one of the ways you can use it is you can make your own measurements ahead of time on a piece of tape. Like let's say you need something kind of odd that's not easy to measure, like right on the inches or the centimeters or whatever you're using. Like let's say it's every 3/4 of an inch. Instead of using your ruler or your measuring tape or whatever you're using to measure to mark out exactly every 3/4 of an inch, which you might get after seeing all these marks for a while, you might start getting confused, like which one am I supposed to use here? You can make it less confusing by just making those marks ahead of time on a piece of tape. And then you're also able to take that tape and move it to different areas around in case you need it more than once. Plus using tape, and again, I use a Sharpie, but you can use whatever you want. But that is much easier to see, especially on something like a window, than a piece of chalk or a pencil or something like that. So that's a tip I thought I would pass along because I use it often. Another thing is a maul stick. So if you don't know what this is, It's a stick that you can use to keep your hand steady and also to keep you from smudging something that's already on your surface. The next thing I have on the list is prep templates, stencils, and printouts. So what I mean by this is doing prep work before you start the project. So again, usually you start by sketching something out beforehand, seeing how it's going to look before you go actually implement the design. Now me, I would rather prep things as much beforehand, especially if I'm going somewhere to do the project. It's not at my own house, because I want to get as much done as I can while I'm out and not be gone as long. So as I talked about with the circles or the arcs, like you could make a template ahead of time. It doesn't have to be for a circle or arc. It could be any shape or any sort of angle that you need. You can do that ahead of time and then bring it with you. And as far as printouts go, obviously you could print out your version of your sketch, or if you just have it sketched out, you don't have to print it. You probably want that, especially if you made it beforehand. But if you're going to be doing something like the grid method, you want that grid made ahead of time so you know where all the grid lines are going to be on your squares that you're going to transfer onto the surface. But in general, I try to have as much prepped as possible before I go out and do something. Also, speaking of graphs and grids, there's graph or grid paper. I have this large roll that I use, and I do usually have it cut into manageable sections rather than just bringing this roll along. But this is in case I need it for guidelines, or if I want to draw something out on the grid, while I'm doing the design. Maybe I thought of something at the last minute that I want to add to it or something like that. So I'll bring some pieces of this with me when I go somewhere. And I actually have another large roll of tracing paper as well in case I need that. So I do tend to bring some of that along as well. And alright, so I'm doing this chalk transfer twice for you on this video. I did it once on glass and once on a chalkboard. And it's basically the same process both times. I have my little design written out in Sharpie so it's easy to see on a piece of paper. And then I flip the paper over and get the back side saturated with chalk, especially where that Sharpie is on the other side. And then I tape my piece of paper to the surface, whether that's the window or the chalkboard, making sure that I have the chalk side down. And then I retrace over where the black Sharpie is. And I'm not actually even using the Sharpie again, I'm just using the cap. So with the cap on, I'm just writing over where I originally wrote the Sharpie. And that will transfer the chalk onto, in this case, the glass. And on the glass, it's kind of hard to see, but it does still work. And there we go. And now again, I'm doing the same exact process with chalkboard. And now I'm doing the pouncing method on both. So in this window video, you're going to see the holes a little better in the paper. In the chalkboard video, you're going to see everything else a little better. But again, I have my design, and then I use my pouncing wheel to make little perforations or holes along the design. And then I'm just using a chalk marker, but you can get like chalk dust and this little tool that will push the dust into the holes. I find it easier to just do a chalk marker. And then you just trace it like a dot to dot. And I decided not to do all those little symbols. Got a little overzealous when I was originally drawing. And now you can see I'm doing the same thing on a chalkboard with just a letter H. It's a little hard to see the holes in this one, but trust me, they're there. And then I filled in the holes again with the chalk marker and then just traced over it. Next, I'm showing you how to do the grid method. So on my design, I made a grid of 3 by 6 inches. And then I replicated that grid but bigger on my chalkboard there. And then to make it a little more interesting and show you how this really works, I decided to draw upside down. So I'm just copying each square as best I can from the original design that has the smaller squares on it. And here I'm demonstrating another tip that I didn't mention earlier in the video, and I should have. This is something I do because I often work alone. So I can tape my yardstick up to the surface so I don't have to hold it there, so I can have both hands free to do something else. And then another thing I can do is I can connect my laser level, which is magnetic, to my metal ruler, and it's easy to get a nice 90-degree angle that way as well. And it's easy just to pick up the level and move it around, up and down the yardstick. Alright everyone, that's it for this video, but heads up, I've still got some bonus footage and sneak peeks coming up shortly. First of all though, I want to thank you, yes you, for watching this video. I do really appreciate it. If you appreciate me back, the best way to show me is to use those buttons on YouTube. Subscribe is the best one, but the other ones work great too. Always check the video description for any updates, announcements, and any relevant links you may need. These are my official social media accounts and other channels for you to check out. Don't fall for any scams or imitations. All of these are linked in the description and also on my website, www.shrushdesign.com as well. Now here's that bonus footage I promised. Alright, real quickly for bonus footage. We haven't seen Assistant Chaz in a while, so I got some footage of him because he interrupted me. What? Mm-hmm. And you can follow Assistant Chaz at the Kingdom of Bushwood on all of these platforms. I also have some outtakes. And then finally, here's a few choice screenshots from the video of all the faces I made. So enjoy. Stay tuned for the sneak peeks coming up real soon. Alright, for the sneak peeks, I actually don't have any more video footage yet of the things coming up because I'm kind of behind, go figure. That's why this video is late. But partially because I'm behind, the video that I plan to do next week, which was the cricket video, I am moving that down to September 20th, so like 2.5 weeks from now. And that's going to be kind of a series, a hot take series kind of thing, kind of an opinion video. Kind of similar to the one I did last week, which was mistakes that beginners make, that I see often. But speaking of series, I have a series coming up starting next week, chalkboard wall murals. So September 6th, next Wednesday, because I'm supposed to be releasing videos on Wednesday. Next Wednesday, I'm going to be starting this series. It's chalkboard wall murals. So basically this is me writing a quote making a little chalk composition on a chalkboard wall that I just created in my studio. You saw it in this video. And I have started these projects. I don't have the video clips ready though. But each of these videos, this is going to be part 1. Each of them are going to have like 3 or 4 just quote compositions because you know I do lettering, so that's kind of my thing. So I'm going to start a series on just making a bunch of those. So you just get those every once in a while. It'll be released as a video. So the first one will be next week. On the following Wednesday, the 13th, as I mentioned before, I'm going to be doing more to my pantry mural that I started last year. So I have kind of started that as well. I just don't have the video clips ready. And then, like I said, the 20th is going to be that Cricut video, the hot take. And as always, I do have these Procreate videos coming out sporadically in between all of these videos. I don't have the miscellaneous video done yet. I know. I've been talking about it forever. I'm going to get that done ASAP, get that out. But other than that, I'm not going to be continuing doing any Procreate animation videos right at this moment because, like I said in earlier videos, Procreate has an update coming out, a big update that they're going to be announcing exactly what it is on the 8th, 7 days from now. And I have a feeling it has something to do with animations and motion, so I don't want to make too many videos where I'm going to have to remake them because something's going to drastically change. So I'm holding off on those. That's the reason why. But as soon as I figure out what that update is and when the update is actually happening, I will be learning the new ways of using Procreate, just like everyone else. And I will be teaching what I wanted to teach as far as animations. So those will be coming out as soon as that update comes out. And I do have other Procreate projects that I'm going to be teaching as well that aren't animation, but I don't know how much of that changes either. So I'm trying to hold off, like I said, until I know exactly how much is changing within Procreate. Now after these videos, my Halloween videos are going to start, and I have started some of those projects as well. I'm going to be doing another window mural this year, at least one, the one on my front window. I might do my back windows as well, where I did my spring mural. Not sure yet, depends on how much time I have. And then I have some signage videos coming out about home signage and business signage, Procreate projects and animations, because hopefully that update will be updated by then and I can teach those. And then again, I have miscellaneous decor projects for Halloween. So that will all be coming up in the last week of September into and through October. But that is it for today, so thank you for watching and I'll see you next week.